Smita is an independent photojournalist and a visual storyteller based in Delhi. Her work primarily focuses on human rights, gender, crime, and social issues. Her work has been published in various places like National Geographic Magazine, The New York Times, BBC World, Time, Channel 4, amongst many others. Smita has exhibited and shown her work across the globe, including at the UN headquarters in New York. Smita is a Getty Images grantee and an IWMF fellow. She received the One World Media Awards for a short film, Rebels with a Cause, in the Popular Features category at BAFTA London in 2019. Other than her home country of India, she has also worked in other countries, highlighting difficult and sensitive issues such as child marriage in Nepal, teenage pregnancy in Kenya, sexual slavery in the Central African Republic, and murdered transport workers of Guatemala. So thank you so much for joining us today, Smita, and I am going to start sharing my screen right now.
Okay, so I just unmuted myself. Am I audible?
You are perfectly audible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Savannah, for having me, and thanks to all the participants. This is a difficult time for all of us, and you know, just to keep our sanity and be positive, it's a big deal. So all of you just keep your spirits up. So I'll just start with my presentation, but I just want to tell you that some of my work is really difficult to digest sometimes because of the issues that I work. And one of the body of work that I'm going to show now is on women who were kept as former sex slaves in the country called Central African Republic. As you can tell from the name, it's a landlocked country in the middle of Africa. And since 2012, there has been a civil war going on in that country, and it's still continuing even today. So I was sent by Human Rights Watch to do this assignment along with their researcher. And I was accompanied by a videographer called Zoe Flood. She's from London. So we went as a team. And you know, later during the conversation, I'll talk about things that we encountered, but I'm just going to show the work now. So Savannah, maybe you can just slip through it, and I'll just ask you to stop if I want to discuss something. So our primary goal, you know, I was told by the editor that we don't want to show the identity of the women. I mean, sometimes when you think about women from, you know, Black, brown women from different countries, whenever it comes to poverty or any kind of gender violence, you see the women, sometimes you see naked bodies, and we certainly did not want that. So here that you see, this is a school which doubled up as a refugee camp because the villages were burnt down and people were taking refuge in this particular school, and they were guarded by the UN police. She, as you can tell, she was also one of the former sex slaves, and she was taken from her home in front of her neighbors by the militia. So the war is against the anti-Balaka and the anti-Saleka, which is the Christian and the Muslims. You know, it's a fight between these two ethnic groups. And sometimes they go to a particular village, they would burn it down completely. They would kill the men. They would take the children, they would take the boys as child soldiers, and they would take the women as sex slaves. And some of the women that I met, they were kept for months, where they were gang raped every day by multiple people. And they also had to do all the household chores, cook for the militia, and then again they were raped. So here is this woman that we interviewed. When she came back home, her husband deserted her because he was ashamed by her, and she was left to take care of her 4 children. And this is her rented home outside a market, and she's playing with her daughter. So this is a 50-year-old woman whose entire village was burnt in front of her. her husband was killed, and so also her sons. And she was taken for a few months, and finally she was rescued. Uh, and when I met her and when we interviewed her, uh, she said that I don't have any hope left because I don't know who to live for anymore and what to live for anymore. Next. This is another woman. I'm just using a pseudo name, Natifa. And I learned so much from her because of her resilience. She was one of the lady who had taken refuge in that school that you saw earlier. And her husband not only shamed her, he abused her and left her and told her that it was her fault that she was taken by the militia. And he went ahead and married somebody else and left her to take care of their 5 children. And this is another lady. The child that you see with her was born out of rape when she was in captivity. And when she gave birth, she said she didn't want to touch the baby because she felt the moment she saw the baby, she remembered how she was violated. But with time, she started loving this child. And when we met her, she was, she was already a very good mother to the child. And she told us that, whatever has happened, the child has nothing to do with what happened, So this is a completely different body of work. This is an assignment that I did for the Audubon magazine. And this is about this bird, which is called hargilla. It's a local name called hargilla, which comes from this word called bone swallower in Assamese. And, its scientific name is greater adjutant stork. So there are just 1,200 adults, storks, that are remaining today. And in a state called Assam in India, I think 80% of the population or 90% of the population of the world are found in that state. And there are 3 villages where they have the habitat, and there is a particular group of women by the name of Hargilla Army, which was founded by biologist Purnima Burman. And she formed this army of women from the village itself. And you can see them here celebrating. And the celebration was a baby shower of this Hargilla bird. So before the hatching period, this is the celebration. And the celebration is done for every pregnant woman in India. And they were doing this for the bird. Next, please. So they were making some handmade sweets, which is offered to the gods for the ceremony. But then you'll see the reality in the next photograph. So the birds, at some point, I think in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, the birds, they were, right from Pakistan to Laos, you could find these birds in many countries. But they were called, because they were bone solvers and because they were carnivorous birds, they were not seen with good eye. And people actually killed them, and they were also killed for their feathers in the early 19th century. So this is the reason why it's an endangered bird, because there are just few of them left. And because there are there are not many trees left, and where they can nest and where they can find food, they are forced to go and live in these garbage dumps. And this is one of the biggest garbage dumps in India, called the Boragar landfill. So here is a school where, this is a school in a village, and this is the Hargilla Army and Purnima. They were, having lessons for them about the bird and its importance to our ecosystem. Next. So the Hargila army, they also have started working on various products, and one of them is making the traditional mekla chador, which is a dress with the Hargila motifs. So this is generating income for them, and that this is also encouraging them to, you know, support in the conservation of the birds. Next. So this is the last image. In the front is Dr. Purnima Burman, and these are some of the women of the Hargila army. And you can see they're all wearing the Hargila masks, the headgear. And they often wear it to raise awareness. So I think this is the last slide of my presentation. And yeah, so I'm not going to show this work. If anyone is interested here in this panel, you can go to Nat Geo magazine, the October issue. And this is my latest work, which I have been doing for many years, which is on child sex trafficking between India and Bangladesh. And this is a labor of 2.5 years of working on assignment. I think Savannah is going to share the link with you. Thank you.
Absolutely. The link is shared just there now. So I would definitely highly recommend everybody to check out that story. And thank you so much for that, Smita. Let me just, can you unmute yourself, Laura, so that you pop up to the top, please?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Okay, now I'm going to make you the host. And now I'm very pleased to introduce Laura. So Laura Saunders is a photographer and filmmaker working in Southern Arizona and Southwest Virginia. She graduated with distinction from the Documentary Photography and Photojournalism Master's Program at the London College of Communication in 2011. Her work deals with environmental extraction in rural Appalachia, as well as stories rooted in historical understanding of forced migration, for-profit incarceration, and the growth industry of US border militarization. She's a member of the Juntos Photo Cooperative, Women Photograph, and an IWMF Fellow. Her work has been exhibited in the UK and the US, and with organizations including the Bronx Documentary Center and Looking at Appalachia. Her work can be found in The Intercept, Der Spiegel, The Guardian, High Country News, and Politico, among many others. So thank you very much for joining us, Laura.
Thank you so much, Savannah, for having me, for everyone who's gotten on yet another Zoom. And I'm really grateful for you all spending this time with us this morning. My morning here, I am currently on the East Coast in the States. This is another story. We can transition now into my work in Arizona. This is a story that I did with High Country News about this incredible woman you see in the top left corner. Her name is Myrna. She fought really, really hard to get her husband out of detention and eventually was successful after several years of serious struggle, and now has really devoted herself to doing community work and helping other families who might have mixed status individuals, some who are not documented and others who are. And just doing really incredible work in that way. This work is, I contributed to a report, the Transnational Institute, with a writer friend of mine who does a lot of work on the border as well in the surveillance industry. And so this work was used in that context and used to illustrate the amount of money and funding that gets pumped into shifting not just from physical border construction, but also surveillance and technology that allows people to be surveilled or monitored or tracked or you know, just paid attention to in a way that wouldn't be possible without these machines. And again, a lot of my work, I'm trying to ask questions about who's there and why, and what are they doing? What are the stories behind what we're showing? Like, what are the layers of how we're sharing the things that we're learning as we go along with our cameras? I think a lot about the power that my camera holds inherently and the history of where it's come from and my presence, you know, as a white woman in this space, all of the things that carries. And so when I move through different physical spaces, I try to be aware of that. If it gives me more leeway to be somewhere where other people can't, then I try to pay attention to that. And if it means that I need to move differently, then, you know, I will. These are some images right from along the border, just beneath, it's an area called Lukeville. It's a port and right on the edge of the US and Mexico border. And there are quite a few different shops that sell these camouflage different gear for people to cross, and for coyotes or you know, individuals who might be being trafficked, or you know, there's many layers happening here. But these stores are absolutely another part of this border industry that have come up because people are able to now make a profit on an industry that wasn't as big before, because there's more surveillance and there's more attention in this region. So I'm also really interested in asking, like, what are the other things that are maybe less apparent than the strong arm, but come up like this, like a whole new sort of like economy that gets created from this at a local level. And then this is another part of the tech that you see when you're in the desert. And this was at a border security exposition where they were training, they were doing demos of security gear and tech, and yeah, and then also just my work is very much rooted in history and in the layers of colonial conquest, of imperialism, and trying to make sure that whatever I share has enough context and layers to it that it doesn't flatten things, it doesn't simplify things. I always want my stuff complicated. I want people to, I don't need a specific conclusion, but I want it to ask questions. And I'm going to share one more thing if we have time, which is a short clip of a film that I made for The Intercept. A lot of this work is related to that. And it's not wanting to show me the video. Okay, here it is. So this is a film that I made for The Intercept. It was a long-term project that I did that documented the federal prosecution of a humanitarian aid worker, a desert aid worker. And this is a short clip of the film that I made. You can also see the photos that I made for that on The Intercept. The longer story is called Bodies in the Borderland, but I'll play a short clip from this film called Let Them Have Water.
January of 2018, I was arrested by Border Patrol and charged with harboring. In the Border Patrol criminal complaint against me, they said that I was providing food, water, beds, and clean clothes to two men. And so they charged me with harboring. Went through Border Patrol custody, then appeared in front of a judge and was released on my own recognizance. And that was over a year ago, and we've been engaged in various legal proceedings leading up to a potential trial sometime later this year.
Mimi Phillips. I moved to Ajo about 15 years ago, and about 8 or 9 years ago, a group of us began a small version of the Samaritans here. I guess every time I look at Scott, I think of my own son. And it's unconscionable to think that he's been charged with felonies for doing what, as a parent, I would be so proud of what he'd done. And I know his parents are proud.
People have always crossed in the Ajo area. People have always been walking through the desert. People have always been finding ways to come here through the desert. But what happened is it was turned into a major industrial scale operation in the 1990s and early 2000s as they really pushed people out into places like these deserts and mountains. what had been really a small scale thing, local organizations that move people and goods to the desert, a small handful of Border Patrol agents that might go out and try to interdict people or might be involved in, finding people who had died, or local residents who would respond to people who needed food and water. That all just completely mushroomed into this massive, massive industry.
Okay. So that is what I'm sharing today. Yeah, I'll leave it to Savannah now and we can go from there.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Laura. And thank you both. Those were both very, very, very interesting talks. And I'm sure I speak for everybody when I thank you very much for your contribution and for sharing your work. There's so much to dig into. It's hard to even know how to start. But just a reminder to everybody who is joining us, please do feel free to pop your questions in the chat. And don't hold back, and I'll sort of sift through and try to get as many from there as I can. But to sort of kick us off, I was wondering if we could maybe start by reflecting on what kinds of responsibilities do you feel as image makers when you're representing particularly people in vulnerable positions or people without power in a lot of these dynamics, for example, in the work that you're describing, Laura?
Yeah, I think generally I try to ask, what is my motivation? Why am I here? Who am I being held accountable to? Is it my editor, or is it the person who's giving of their experience and giving of their time and putting themselves in perhaps a more vulnerable situation? Unpopular opinion, I think there are times when it's too dangerous, and I think it needs to be handled with care. There's nothing to me that would be more important than the safety of someone who's giving of their time and of their heart, and of maybe something that's the most traumatic thing they've ever lived through. And I also think a lot about that as far as vulnerability goes, but just how we interact and how we don't drill in with questions or like invade space or someone's experience of something without first building a relationship and making sure that there is enough comfort and understanding of what's happening and explaining what's going on and what are the implications of this process, and just trying to get as candid as possible. But I would love to also to hear what Smita might have to say about that question.
To unmute. So, the first fundamental truth is that we are nothing without the people that we photograph. If they say no, we come back with zero. And this is something that all of us have to remember. If they are not comfortable with something, I think we should understand that and we should accept that. If there is a certain reason why they are not comfortable, and if you think that is workable and that does not put them at risk, maybe you can explain it to them, because sometimes the perspectives differ. People's education levels of education are different. For example, if I go to and work at a remote place where there's not much electricity and where they are not really exposed to the internet, and I'm working on a story on child marriage, and I meet a particular family where they had to get their daughter married at the age of 12 because they were so poor, they had nothing to do, and they thought, if we get her married, at least she will get her meals every day. So their reason was that, let me send my daughter to a richer family, not richer, but better than us, who can provide her some kind of security and food. So their reasons are different, although it is illegal, in the country. In most of the countries, it is illegal to have child marriage. So you cannot say that that person is particularly wrong or right, because we cannot be judge. We cannot judge anyone of their situation, And how you represent people is a huge responsibility. What captions do you write? What kind of context do you bring them to? what kind of, I call it like how we use a sieve or how we use a tea strainer to strain the tea leaves. It's something like this. What are the things that we keep back and what are the things that we give out to the world?
And how do you make those decisions? And similarly, how do you make decisions, Laura, when something is too dangerous? So how do you decide, what bits fall through, Smita?
Uh, so, sometimes you have to believe in your instinct and think logically that if I'm telling this story, is it going to help in the awareness of the issue? Is it going to help in bringing some change in the policy? Or maybe the government will take notice of it and maybe do something about it. So the intention is there, and I'm not ruling the fact that we don't go there with an intention. We all go there with an intention, the reason why we go there is because we care for that particular thing, for that particular issue, as Laura also mentioned, she cares about that issue. That's why she was there. And so
I thought that was such a lovely metaphor, the idea of a tea strainer, or of, you're sort of filtering the information that you're given, and you have to make
right.
a decision about what people learn in the world and what people don't. And how do you come to that?
You know, any country, any region which has an issue, it comes from a whole length of research that you have to do prior, before you go actually and meet the communities, the people. And if there are any relevant laws, you have to educate yourself about those laws. Because sometimes you are there for maybe a month, or maybe you're there for some time and you come back. What happens to them after you're gone? If something goes wrong, if your photograph brings them some kind of danger. For example, there was this particular girl that I met, and she was domestically, she was abused, and again, it was child marriage, and then she came back to her family, and this was again an assignment that I had to do. And when I met her, I spent a lot of time just chatting with her. And she said, I asked her, is it okay to show your face? She said, that's not a problem. Everybody knows that, I got married early. Everybody knew that my husband used to beat me. So everyone is aware of it. But I have a very different Facebook profile. I have a lot of friends who are not from my town, and I don't want them to know about it. So I don't want my photograph to be on Facebook. So she gave me that particular thing, why she didn't want, and which totally makes sense. She's trying to get away from her past and start afresh, and she's building a new life, and she doesn't want anyone to know about her past because she's not comfortable about it. So I think that's fine. And so I told the editor that we should not have it on Facebook, or we should not have it on any social media. But on the website, yes, we can publish, but nothing local. Yeah.
That's really interesting. So it's sort of that combination, I guess, of the law, and then just having those conversations and understanding what people themselves, what their limits are and where their comfort is. No, that's really helpful and really interesting. And Laura, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I've had some really specific things. I was, documenting during an ongoing federal trial. It was nerve-wracking to say the least, especially when I edited it, because I edited it as well as did the DP work, along with Kitra Kahana, who I have to thank, who did beautiful DP work as well. There was for sure a moment of pushback that I had to have about not just centering Scott, as this person who's like alone in this struggle. And yes, it was the trial that he was involved in, but this was a much larger story and a much wider thing. And so when it came to talking about who is vulnerable, there's a lot of people that come through the desert and want to make a compelling story about migrants that die, while passing through the desert. And there's a lot of sort of like goriness around showing skeletal remains, or, you know, people that have passed. And desconocidos is the unknown, the people that we can't know their names. There's no identification. And so there's sort of this like genre of like really intense, gory, exploitative, extractive storytelling that's come out of this like desire to show the thing as if that will change the thing, but we know that it hasn't. And so also while I'm making this, I'm thinking about, here's this like very, you know, rather well off, educated, you know, he has a doctorate, like he's been targeted because of all these things, but he's very much in the middle of this trial. And then there's these other, you know, individuals who have lived on this land forever and who are being told that now they don't belong there. And so there's this tension, right, of like, who is vulnerable and in what way are we calling them vulnerable? Do they perceive themselves as vulnerable? Are we giving them that title, or is this resiliency that we're showing, and can we name that too? And then I also just think about, you know, in that instance, I had to think about if this was played during the trial, because it happens, you know, like they showed a Washington Post article in the middle of the trial, and you know, my heart skipped a beat, because it's like they can easily say, oh, look, you said this here, and so now like you're endorsing this. And so there are times when it's really clear, and then there are times when I really try to spend time on it and try to interrogate, like, what have I been told versus like, what are the experiences that I'm having with these people in front of me?
That's really interesting. And it makes me wonder, how can you photograph people who are maybe in a vulnerable situation, or marginalized, or are lacking power otherwise in a situation? How can you photograph them in such a way that doesn't provide more information to the powerful? So the context, I guess, for thinking about this question very much, my background personally is in anthropology, and there's this concept of studying up. So about, you know, when you shine a light on power, you know, you can expose power, but what happens when you shine a light on the people who are negatively impacted by that power, and how can that be used against them, and how do we avoid that? So especially in the context of photographing during an ongoing trial, I can imagine that would be very complicated and very, very difficult to navigate and negotiate. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I mean, I really trusted Scott. I trusted Scott and, you know, his legal team, as far as the analysis of what was appropriate and okay to talk about. Yeah, I just constantly had to imagine, like, what if this gets played in court? Is this going to be something that could be used against him or not? And the answer needed to always be no. And the answer also needed to always be, could this complicate the things that were being said about the work that he had done? So I think it was also a chance to, you know, a lot of my work I like to think of too as like the histories that have been written by someone else. I want them to be rewritten and complicated. So the work I'm doing at home in Appalachia, it's people are already trying to say something else about how these folks are behaving, and about, did this even happen? And there's an incredible legacy of resistance in the Appalachian region, and an incredible legacy of extraction as well. And so I think there's just always, for me, there's a thread of history and of reimagining, of repurposing, of naming things as they are, as sort of like an anecdote to this like hand of power that might try to say something else. Because you know when you see something true, right? Like you feel that. It's not like an abstract. There's something that engages with people. And so I try to trust that as well. It becomes a more intuitive thing in that moment. But yeah, always layering things and working really with a lot of the facts that are happening around what's going on, and getting really into the nitty gritty of like, this is a massive industry. I can tell you the data. I can list off the stats. I can complicate it in that way, but also here are the people who are living it and who are going through it.
I feel like that, you know, obviously a lot of the work that you both do is very political in some way or another. And, you know, if I'm thinking about Smita's work, especially when it comes to like work on gender-based violence, you know, work about border communities and migration at the border, for Laura, like, where is the line, and how do you situate yourself between this idea of maybe journalism and documentary versus activism? And how do you negotiate that or navigate that? Because of course, you know, we're going to be talking about objectivity much later on in the panel series, but that is, I sort of see that emerging as something that it's very complicated when you're working with power, right?
I think there's an incredible legacy in journalism of muckraking, as they say, or you know, I.D.B. Wells. There's all these pioneers who really began what we call journalism as an effort to speak truth to power. And so I think the distinction of saying that you're more of an activist rather than a documentarian or a historian or you know, all these things, I think there are tools, you know, Ariella Azoulay just put out an incredible book called Unlearning Imperialism, and she speaks about this moment of the shutter and the colonial violence of the shutter as like a mechanism for repeating these things that power does in spaces where people don't have been disenfranchised or othered. And so I think it's like really great language about how, you know, we are constantly engaging in a politic, right? Being a person in the world. And depending on what body we occupy, that gets validated or it gets dismissed. And so I try to think about it in that framework for myself, as well as the places I am. I reject the notion that because I'm documenting things in Appalachia that I have that it's less credible. I think that we have incredible insights on the experiences that we've had, and we're experts in that. And I try to support work that speaks to that as well. And Smita, I think, you know, the time that you've spent on these subjects, like, you get invested and you do this work for an amount of time and you have love for these people. It's like the most human thing that you can do. So I think this notion that we need to cut off the most human parts of ourselves to do better work about engaging humanity just doesn't line up for me personally.
I think, you know, if we are working on something, and Laura mentioned the word tools, right? So if your tool is a book, writing, if your tool is the camera, you're taking photographs, you're making images, or you're making a film. Sometimes I think these are tools that we use, and there's a particular intention that we have. And if that means activism, you know, raising awareness on something, starting a discussion, if that's activism, I will very well accept it. You know, and again, the distinction is very different, and it becomes a bit complicated when you're working with publications, because with the way the world is today and the polarization that is happening in all the corners of this globe, you know, the moment you speak up, you are being noticed, or you are being you know, kept in a particular loop. So then do you not talk? Do you not tweet? Do you not do anything? Because that all falls into what is your intention? What do you care about? And why are you talking about it? Why are you showing something? Because you want some change to happen, right? So we all are activists in our own way, I think. Even if that means you're writing or you're tweeting, you're using your social media for something, we all are into it.
Yeah, I would just say also that because we're in the world we're in now, if you're not acting in a way that lets people feel safe to work with you, they won't work with you. So I think that can be pretty discerning if you have topics that you're interested in doing or things that you're drawn to make. Asking yourself, like, what do I need to be in line with? And like, what are my values in these spaces? So I think that can be, you know, again, like, you might be called an activist, but if that's the case, you know, and that lets you share the stories that you want to make, then there it is.
Yeah, there's a really fantastic poem that I read a few years ago called "I Woke Up." I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's brilliant, and it really just, you know, it just very much elucidates the fact that everything is political. You know, by engaging with the world, you know, there's political act in that, in whatever way you choose to engage. So I think those are really quite good and quite nuanced responses to what can be kind of a sticky question. So thank you for that. Something that you mentioned, Smita, that I wanted to go back to was you were talking about consent, particularly when working with people who don't have the same access to media, who don't have internet access, or who maybe have very, very limited internet access. And I was wondering, one, I think a question that I'm asked often is, can you ever actually achieve informed consent if people don't have media access? And that's sort of one half of the question. And the other half of the question is, in what ways do you subvert or acknowledge the inherent power dynamic in that photographer photographed relationship in a way that does enable truly informed consent, right? Because informed consent means that people know where their photographs are going, why they're being used, and they know that, you know, all those things, and they also know that they can say no, right? So, but I think that power dynamic can really complicate people's ability or willingness to say no. So I was wondering, when you're working in those contexts, how do you manage that? Because it's very tricky, I think.
It is exceptionally tricky, and again, it has multiple layers. It's just not that you go somewhere, you talk, and then you say, okay, this is what I'm working on, and this is where it's going to be published. Are you okay with it? And if sometimes people don't understand so much, so it's your responsibility to explain it to them, you know, where it is going to go, which are the different forms of media it's going to go. If it's on a video, how it's going to be, you know, seen in the video. Is it going to be on television? Is it going to be on certain channels? Is it going to be used on the internet too? It's just important to ensure the different mediums that is a possibility, that their images or their interviews, everything can go. And I'll just give one example now about my latest story on the child sex trafficking. So if you read the story, you will know that although I have worked on with many families and girls across both Bangladesh and India, primarily the story is about two girls. One girl is from Bangladesh, one girl is from India. And the story mentions that the town they are from, and it's a big town, it's like a big town. And we used pseudonyms for those two girls. When we were at the final editing process, and we were, the captions and everything was almost done, and I noticed that one of the girls that I worked with, she was trafficked, she was taken to a brothel, she spent there. Sometimes she was rescued by the police, then she went back to the shelter. She spent time at the shelter for more than a year. Finally, she was sent back home after all the paperwork, and she was also given trauma counseling and all that. And I went back to meet her after a year, to see how she was doing after she returned home. And she started working at a particular factory. So this is a particular snacks making factory. I'm not going to use that word, but that particular word was used in the caption that I wrote at that point of time. And then I started thinking during the final round that if I give the name of that particular product of snack, can anyone identify her in that town? How many factories are there in that town? If there are 3, can anyone go and find out that was there a girl who was away, who has just joined a year ago? Can someone put 2 and 2 together, and can someone find her if that intention was there? And then I said, yes, it is possible. And I immediately wrote to my editors that I think we should not use this word because she could be located. So some things as deep and as minute as this can impact somebody's life. If she today is recognized, what is going to happen to her? Can she live in that same community? She will be thrown out. And not just she, what about her entire family? People will not invite them or go to their house. People will, the way the shaming and ostracization happens, it's just too much to take in. And it can destroy someone's life. So this is where the role of power, the role of responsibility, because with power comes responsibility. Remember the Spider-Man movie? right? So you have a responsibility, and you can never let go of that, because you have to think over what you're doing. Yeah, I hope I answered the question.
Absolutely. Laura, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, that was beautiful. That was so true. I mean, I think it's understanding your place. I think they're understanding when you're able to ask yourself what's the goal of what you're publishing and where and how. I think, you know, this understanding of people who are doing storytelling to do no harm, this like tenet of journalism and of storytelling to make it a collaborative process, but also understand that, yes, you do have power through these publications. And asking what are the limits of being able to share that with people who just live in a totally different world. I think that's like that's an important line of questioning for everyone who's involved with this. I wish these conversations were more standard within the process of post-production, especially. I think it's really easy to have like thorough conversations beforehand, or, you know, very often as a freelancer that I would come to someone and say, hey, I have this story that I really want to do. And I've, you know, like all of these contacts, right? But really they're relationships. So just like sort of breaking down like these terms that we use that like take away the process of this being another person that we're interacting with. And, you know, I think there are times when people think they've done their due diligence, but people have been, you know, deeply harmed and problems have come out of it. So it's not an abstract to think that that could happen. I also think the pandemic has kind of laid that bare, right? With like working around COVID and trying to keep people safe very physically. What are you willing to do or not willing to do? And it doesn't have to be like this complex thing. It can just be like, I care about you and I want to make sure that, you know, this interaction doesn't feel like it's repeating the same patterns of power and abuse that we see in other places. Because I think that can be, you know, we don't strip it down to that, but it's very often the same kind of things of like, I have control in this, I'll be a little coercive, or, you know, like to get the thing, or like the time frame, right? Like it needs to be done now, and people aren't actually there in their process of healing or of being ready to share certain parts, or even like when you're interviewing someone and you're saying like, oh, can you repeat that really violent piece again? Cause I didn't get good sound, you know, just like being aware of like these really critical moments where you're like at a heart level with someone and you need to treat it with deep care and with reverence.
I just want to add something to what Laura just said. You know, when you meet people and when you discuss and when you explain why you are there, and when you start building a relationship, sometimes they start getting hopes. And when you tell them that, okay, I'm working on this big story, I don't think you should give anyone any false hope that, yeah, maybe when the story is out, you might get some money from this places. Or maybe, you know, somebody is going to sponsor your education and somebody is going to do that. I don't think we should give, I mean, with power, because this is again power, right? You are trying to extract something out of them. That doesn't mean that you give them some kind of bribe that this might happen in future. That is not right also. Yeah. And that also is power, I think. Using power in the wrong way, I would say.
Absolutely, that's super relevant, and I think it's really important to bring up. I just wanted to remind everybody that you are welcome. Don't be shy to pop your questions in the chat. I feel like what always happens is we get down to like the last 5 minutes and then all the questions will come. So don't hold back because we might not get to. I've got a couple follow-up questions there. And I guess one of them is, you're talking about, both of you were talking about how, you know, in the post-production process, you know, attention to detail about the captions, or I think Laura said that like more conversations, more sensitive conversations need to happen in the post-production process. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about, like, can you name like what questions do we need to ask ourselves, and how do we integrate that better into our workflow? Do you have an answer for that? For, you know, quite practical, tangible, how do we apply that?
Was that a go ahead, Smita? Okay. Tangible questions. I feel like I'm going to be this person that's a little difficult. It's context for the project, to be totally honest, right? Because there's different people, there's different work, there's different concerns, there's different levels of concerns, right? So like the work I'm doing in Appalachia, there's absolutely, we know that people are being surveilled. Like there's been FOIAs, like I'm doing some of that work behind the scenes as well, and like the investigative side of things. So paying attention to like the different, you know, if you've done a risk assessment, I don't know if people are familiar with that term here. I think risk assessments are great. I think they apply after you've made the thing. And I think you might have an image that you love and that speaks to the whole project. And it's like, wow, oh my gosh, look at the light, look at the content, like all the stuff is present, and it's not safe. It's not safe to publish in that moment. So I think maybe making peace with like creating things as a process and not just as a goal. And then inserting questions about safety, inserting questions about how much layers you need. You know, is this a term that's gonna cause attention to this in a way we don't want? You know, like, is this a geography that's gonna make someone be more closely targeted? Is this, you know, there's all sorts of specifics that you can ask about, depending on how big the audience might be or the who's gonna be seeing it, how to frame it in a way that keeps people safer. Those are the things I pay attention to anyway.
Can I ask a follow-up question there? Just because it reminds me of when you said earlier that sometimes, you know, it's too raw for people or it's not appropriate to continue with the project. And when you're hired and you're working for a client, be that a magazine or whoever, how do you kill a story if they don't want to kill it? Do you know what I mean? Like if you're like, this can't go forward in this way because it's not appropriate. How do you negotiate that relationship?
I feel like that's an indication that that's not the story to be telling. I feel like, okay, now we actually get to learn what are we trying to talk about, because it's not this. If this is doing harm, this isn't the conversation. So then the question becomes, how do we tell the story that we thought we were telling, right? And this happens so much when you're in the field and so much when you have this beautiful storyboard and you're like, oh my gosh, like we're gonna go here, it's gonna be great. And then it changes and you're like, oh, I guess it changed. But like, that's the nature of the work that I actually clearly love, because I'm getting more excited about talking about it. But, but I feel like there's this energy of like, oh, you failed, or oh, you can't deliver this, when actually it's like, no, you can look at this and you can ask questions and you can grow it into something else that's actually more holistic and paying attention and like really tuned into the thing. And I'd say 9 times out of 10, the editor is going to be like, wow, I'm really glad that we took time to shift this, or to like pay attention to this, or to allow this person to like, you know, what you're doing is listening to someone and giving them power, right? And then redirecting because of that. And I think that can only be a way to learn more about whatever it is you're trying to share with someone else. So
I'll just add a short thing. You know, when you're out there on the field, sometimes you're just taken aback with things that are happening. Sometimes you might get overwhelmed. And this is especially, you know, this is an advice for beginners. Sometimes there are some stories that happen right behind you. You just have to keep your antennas, you know, on all the time, because you don't know what's going to unfold sometimes, because you go there with some intention and something else happens. And it is then that you have to take a call that I think we should also include this, you know, something which is relevant, of course, to what you're working on. So yeah, I mean, as you spoke about the working process, right? And in the editing process, Laura answered most of it. I think that's where your responsibilities come double-fold, because you have all the information with you, you have all the images with you, and then you're with yourself and where you're with the edit. That is when you have to take a call about what things should go out, what things should not go out because of XYZ reasons. And the reason can be law, can be safety, security, you know, bringing risk to the people that we photograph. And again, I hate to tell this, but oh my God. So the story that just come out, this was so tough because there were so many laws in India and the UNICEF Code of Ethics. There are so many things that we were not allowed to do. And also because I started the project 2.5 years back, at that point of time, a particular law changed while I was working. So at that point of time, you could take photographs of minors and you could show it if you don't reveal their identity. And then the law changed while I was working on it. And it became that you cannot show their faces or anything. And I lost a hell lot of images. And it was almost like I was crying. And we all were frustrated, like, we can't use this, because the lawyer was saying, no, you can't do this, this is the new law. And we were like, I wish we knew about it. Because if we knew about it, we would take photographs of girls who were majors at that point of time. And the project is about child sex trafficking. So you're talking about girls, teenage girls who are trafficked for sex. So then what do we do? So, again, it comes back to your research. How much research have you done? So then I had to refer back to the date of birth of the girls. Each and every girl, we had to produce the date of birth to see whether they became a major by the time the story got published. So these are the small things that you have to keep in mind when you're working on something complicated and sensitive. Yeah.
That must have been a very, very painful process, but that's a perfect example for that question. So thank you very much. We have a few questions coming in here. You did say in that answer, Smita, you said that would be one bit of advice that you would give to people starting out. Shireen here has asked for any other advice, maybe specifically, about if you were to give advice to someone who's getting ready to start a new project about working with communities of people who are in vulnerable situations. Would you have any other advice along those lines?
So the first advice is that, why do you want to work on it? Why do you care? Just because that is a particular hot issue at that point of time, because I see a lot of young photographers who write to me sometimes and they say that I want to work on this. Oh, I want to work on prostitution. They don't even use the word sex worker because they don't even know that this is derogatory. So if you don't even know what kind of language you should use, I don't think you're the right person to work on that particular project. And it's not that I'm judging that person. Maybe not, I'm not. But it's just that if you want to really work on something, you have to do your homework. You have to know about that particular, even whether it is environment, whether it is culture, anything, you just have to know about what you want to do, why you want to do, and are you really passionate about it? Can you stick to it when people say no? Because I have got, let me tell you, I think I got 14 rejections from grants when I was working on this project. I got rejected by everybody. No one wanted to, no one, I didn't even make it to the finalist. And at that point of time, it was frustrating. Of course, I was spending money out of my own pocket, doing assignments and putting money from the assignments to this project. And finally, Nadjo picked it up. So it's, do you have the conviction to stick to it when things get rough? That you should be prepared for, because things are not going to be rosy. Let me tell you, and all of us know that. All of us who are working, we know that how tough it is to survive in this industry.
Is there anything else you'd like to add to that, Laura?
I got wrapped up in Smita's response. I don't remember the question. I'm sorry.
Don't worry. It was just about advice for somebody maybe starting out with a career in documentary photography, or specifically maybe on projects in which someone will be working with people in vulnerable situations.
I think find your people. There's so many people that work so differently in this industry. And, for me, I joined along with the Juntos cooperative that you mentioned at the beginning. And that's been a really transformative experience. The essence of the cooperative is that we are lifting each other up. We work in the same region, and yet we're promoting each other and helping each other and like making sure the assignments are safe and helping get PPE and spaces like Women Photograph, IWMF, like places that want to see you succeed, seek those out and find people who when you speak from the place where you feel most alive and most good about your work and most excited about your work, and people are replying in a positive way, stay with those people, because there's going to be plenty of people who don't respond that way to your truth. And so I think it's like really essential to just get really rooted as much as you can and as often as you can, because there will be a lot of rejections, and there will be a lot of people who choose to misunderstand the way you address your work, especially if it's within these sorts of conversations where you're challenging maybe a way of working that's become quite normalized. So yeah, I would just say, like, really find your people.
That's great. That's very helpful for sure. Keith has asked, do you ever feel that just by being there, you've changed the environment or situation for the worse? And if so, how do you deal with that?
So, our role is not to go and change the world. Of course, we do hope we can change the world, but it's really, you are documenting an evidence that can be used in future and also in the present, right? If you're working on environmental issues and you're showing the communities who are, undergoing water crisis and they have to walk a long way to get water, and if that story goes out to the right places and that pushes the government to maybe build a well or bring water supply, then yes, your work has done some wonders. Sometimes there are small baby steps that can happen, and I think that's totally worth it. I think that makes photography totally worth it.
I think that we just have to acknowledge that our presence in a space will change it. I don't really subscribe very much to the fly on the wall method. It's not the way that I get good images or good footage. It's not the way that I feel comfortable. So that's not, once I realized that's not how I was going to make my favorite work, I sort of departed from that. But I think just, acknowledging what we bring into a space, and like Smita said, like, it's understanding why we're there and what we're bringing into it and how we relate to it. Are we informed enough to make sure we're not replicating the systems of power, right, that are oppressing the people that we're working with? Knowing enough to make sure that we're interrupting that point of conversation. Those are all things that I try to sit with and like hold with when I move into a new place.
That reminds me of a conversation actually that I had recently with Jason Houston as part of the podcast series that I've been running. And he was talking about how, like, it's a photographer's responsibility to photograph an issue aesthetically, but also show the depth and the nuance of it, which is something that I think you both have spoken to during this session. And we were talking about how it can be much easier to photograph the more vulnerable people in a dynamic. One, because of access. Usually you have greater access to people who are in more vulnerable situations than you do to people who are in power. But also because it can be more aesthetically stimulating to photograph. For example, he gave an example of overfishing. We photograph the fishermen. We don't really go and photograph the storage fish facility or the distribution center as much. More you're going to photograph, or there tends to be there's a tendency to photograph sort of the people maybe with less power in that chain relationship. And I guess I'm wondering, how do you negotiate that challenge, and how do you ensure that you're not shifting the blame or putting the blame on a certain group of people, and that you're able to show sort of the depth of that? And how do you, especially when access is an issue, how do you overcome barriers of access, or how do you overcome those barriers to show the nuance of it? I know it's a very blurry question. I hope that makes sense.
I can start this one. I photograph power a lot in different ways, like the actual hand of power, like that's a lot of what my work on surveillance is about. It's about flipping the script on that, and about rejecting these sort of obsessions that we have with people who have been placed into like hugely violent situations by the very system that I'm wanting to talk about. So I sit with this question a lot, and I go to a lot of the institutions, and I've made photos that people find less interesting. I think there are ways to engage it. I think it's part of why I've shifted more towards film. I think film allows for a nuance and for complexity and rhythm and pacing and character development that I find to be just like really nourishing and interesting as like someone who's making something. But as far as like what allows that to be a more fair process, I think, you know, inherently with power, there's more insulation around it. And so your access to power, right, is limited in that like there's laws that limit you from being in proximity to things or from photographing things, or, you know, you'll be prevented in the midst of photographing this thing. You'll be told that actually that's illegal too. So I think it's like, there's a certain kind of courage, I think, that I've had to get from putting myself in those spaces. But I also acknowledge that like being who I am in the world and having, you know, like I'm a citizen of this country, I have papers to be here, I have, you know, the visual privileges of being this white woman who can like have these conversations with people and not be like immediately suspect. Like, I think understanding the places where you can absorb some of that shock of what insulates privilege and power, and then like work within that. I don't know if I'm making sense, but I think about all these layers of of like race and power and all these issues that we talk about in a really public level at this point in time. So yeah.
So when you talk about access to powerful people, first of all, they don't give you time. Right? It takes a lot to just go and seek that appointment and talk to them. The level of bureaucracy, especially the work that I do, and dealing with the crimes, because I work with, I've worked very closely with police, with the anti-human trafficking unit, and it was so difficult to just get in with them. So just building up that relationship was, it took a lot of effort and time. And again, things are not the same when it comes to the vulnerable communities. They are more acceptable. But they do have questions. They do ask you why, because you know what, even if I'm a brown-skinned person, I'm a city-bred girl who knows how to speak English, and my clothing is pretty different from them. So I am from the privileged class. So when I enter to these vulnerable regions, I'm looked as an outsider. And when I'm in those communities, people ask questions. Why am I there? And if I'm working, you know, Savannah, I think we have had this conversation. If I'm working with a particular family where something has happened, the girl was raped, you know, and if I just get out of my car, take out my camera bag and just go to that house, I'm going to single her out, you know, and what happens when I'm gone? So I don't do that. First of all, I don't even carry a camera bag. I don't carry a camera bag. I have a dirty looking tote bag, and within that, I carry my gear in a protected socket, you know, because I don't want to come across as a photographer, as a journalist when I'm there. And the reason is to protect myself, because I don't want anyone to come and harm me, because the perpetrators are within the same community sometimes. I don't know who the perpetrator is sometimes, and sometimes they are in jail and they get out on bail and they're roaming on the streets, right? So I have to think about my safety, and I have to think about the family's safety. So sometimes what I do is that my communication with the family is very clear why I'm there, but with the community, no. I tell them that perhaps I'm an anthropologist, or I'm a researcher, or I'm a healthcare worker. And as I told you, I use a lot of I talk a lot about menstruation and female hygiene, and the men immediately disappear. They get so embarrassed, and that leaves me alone. And then I go to other houses, I go to the community, I go to and talk to the people. Once they're bored of me, they have had enough of me, and they go about doing their own chores, I start doing my work. I think that also talks about access and power. How do you control the power that you have in a particular situation?
I mean, I would also add too, just like question the narrative that you're given from the places where people are experiencing the harm from, right? So like if there's a narrative that's a through line on something, or like if if you just quote someone who's, you know, like we're having really important conversations right now about the Proud Boys, for example, white supremacist groups that are being like given full mouthpieces to say what they want unchecked, full quote. So just question who you're quoting, who you're giving authority to by quoting them, and not challenging why you're giving them air, right? So very often what will happen is people who are really powerful or have money to have a PR team or to do these things, like they have a really curated point before even reaching your ears. And so to think about that and think and question, why are they letting me get in this car for this ride along, for this CBP ICE raid? Why do they want me to make photos of people being arrested and handcuffed? And can I do this even safely for these individuals who've not clearly not consent? You know, ask yourself, like, why am I allowed here but not there, right? And I think there are times when you can engage that critically, and I mean there always are, right? But it again, I feel like is about being really aware of the fact that like there is going to be a moment where all of the study and knowledge that you've put into understanding what's happening is going to let you respond in real time and get the thing that you're interested in getting, or talk about the thing that you want to talk about even in post. So I just think, like, again, for me, it's just always about complicating things.
Absolutely. I think those are some really interesting points about access, right? So like, I think Smita's point about how you do that and you take those steps to avoid drawing attention. I think that's so interesting about, you know, your role and your power as a photographer. And then I think, Laura, you've just really complicated that as well with bringing in, you know, that idea of, you know, who has power in my relationship as well, who's giving me access. So there are all these very, very complicated and interconnected and interwoven, I think, layers of power in all of these relationships whenever we're engaging in storytelling, right? There are a couple of questions that have come in here. So one person has asked, has said, I think you've both made it clear that you strongly believe photography shouldn't take power away from the people you photograph, that it should respect people's dignity and agency. Beyond this, do you think that photography can be used as a tool to empower the people you photograph? And if so, how?
I think you can, absolutely. And I'll tell you the reason why. And this is, again, from experience of talking to many people that I have photographed. Sometimes when people go through the worst of things, nobody talks to them. You know, they are so isolated and depressed, and they've gone through the worst. So when I go and meet them, and when I spend time with them, I don't ask them what they have gone through. I just share my own experience. I just basically just talk to them as a human being. And I've had people tell me that, you know what, nobody ever spoke to me as a normal person once I was raped. You know, nobody spoke to me the way you're talking to me, because you are not talking to me with sympathy or pity or with disgust. So there are different labels that are kept on people that they go through. So just treating people normally, just like you and me, that impacted them. And I think that word empowerment comes when they are willing to share the story on their own to you, because they are empowered to share that, to what happened to them. And their willingness to share is also a reason why they don't want others, you know, to go through what they have gone through. And they are also contributing to the awareness by sharing the story, right? It's not just you, or it's just not me who are doing it. Even they are doing it because they are sharing their experiences of a horrible thing that they have gone through.
I really love thinking about this work as a process of like mutual validation. And the times when I feel best about the work, it's because the people that this story has been possible because of say to me, wow, that really felt important and good, and I'm really proud of this, or I feel good about this, or thank you for this. To be honest, like there's a lot of like there's a lot of emphasis placed on like external validation, but for me it's always about the people who I've worked with and who have made the stories happen. if they're happy with the piece, then I feel happy with the piece. And I think that very often you'll get that feedback from people, which is incredible, right? And it's just sort of like, it'll give you like that shot on the arm because you're usually exhausted and a little bit disillusioned and feeling like this imposter syndrome of like, oh, is this okay? You know, like, I think that's a really normal creative part of the process. But yeah, considering these interactions and this work is like a chance to be present with someone, you know, like you were saying, Smita, like, I see you, I hear you, and I validate your experience, and I'm showing it in this way, right? Like, this is my way of saying that to you.
Absolutely. No, those are both really helpful responses, I'm sure. Another person has asked that whether you have ever been asked for money by the people to be allowed to photograph them, how do you negotiate with them, and what are the ethical concerns in this situation? So that definitely is about power, right? That's a huge thing about power. So absolutely. What do you think, Smita?
Yeah. So a lot of times, in India, outside India, I've been asked, yes. And how do I deal with it? I tell them that my job is to tell your story, and this is why I'm here. I'm getting paid because this is my job, this is my profession. I'm not getting paid out of your photograph. I'm getting paid because this is my profession. You have to explain it to people. And then you also have to say that today, if I pay you, people will think that I have bought your, you to agree to having me photograph you with money. So there is an ethical issue, and then no one is going to believe me. And my job as a photojournalist is to show what's happening without manipulating. And if I give you money, it will mean that I'm manipulating you. And that will mean I'm risking my career and my job. So do you want that to happen? So this is what exactly I tell them. Yeah. And they understand. They understand.
Laura, have you ever been in a similar situation or not so much?
Less so. I think my work when I'm on assignment is pretty straightforward. A lot of the assignment work that I've taken in the last few years as I've like become more full-time in my freelancing has been DP work. So I show up with a camera and I put on like microphones on people. I think my longer term work that I choose to do is much more sensitive and could maybe run into those spaces. I also just think it's really interesting because I shifted from photography into filmmaking, and there are different ethical understandings in the documentary world versus the film world versus the photo world. So that feels like pretty jarring to me at this point, because in documentary film, it's like really encouraged at this point. They're having incredible conversations about decolonizing the process and about making sure that you have like really good contracts that protect people who are being portrayed and who can have like full control over their image and rights to their image, and discussions about really endorsing advocacy campaigns that are launched almost the same time as the film itself. So it's just a really different world, and I have questions, I guess, about how it's so different. I don't have answers. I just it's something that I think about and wonder about a lot.
That's so interesting. I've heard that a lot, actually, that there are a lot of differences, but I've also heard that maybe manipulation is a little bit more acceptable in the film world, because just logistically, in order to sync up the sound, I guess, and I don't know, I don't work in film, but it's interesting to think about the differences for sure between those mediums. And I loved something that you said there, Smita, about, people understand. And I think that this is such an important point. People do understand. And I think, there's I think sometimes this very dominant idea, isn't there, that like, oh, well, we can't really get consent because they won't get it, or we can't really, but I think, you're so right that, people will understand why you can't pay them, or people will understand, the nuances of these if we take the time to have those conversations. So I
just want to add one thing, that, it is okay to bring them some food or something. If you're spending time with them, don't give them money, but, you can take them out for lunch somewhere, something that they can afford to go to a restaurant, just take them to a nice restaurant and feed them, or bring them something, or if they have some medical needs, just buy that and get it. That is fine. That is human. That is being human. That is not doing something ethical, I think. That's okay.
For sure. No, I appreciate that. Someone has asked, how do we make sure that we're upholding these values as a community in terms of checking on each other, maybe, and checking with each other ethically? What do you think? Laura, you're part of quite a few communities. Well, you're both part of quite a few communities. I guess, is that something that happens in those communities that you're part of?
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of the co-authors on the Bill of Rights, the much debated the Bill of Rights, the Photo Bill of Rights. I should be specific for those of you that haven't heard. It's a document that some grassroots photo adjacent groups came together and wrote, starting mostly at the beginning of the pandemic, but it came out in June. And yeah, I'm involved in a few other spaces. I personally, this sort of unlearning process and engaging around these conversations of ethics and of power feel like, to me, the most important part of what I do, to be totally honest. And I'm really glad that there seem to be more spaces where we are finding community. I think calls like this are one of those examples. I think the online forum, as imperfect as it can be, has let us have like some really great discussions that have moved the needle a bit and have let people complicate what they're doing. I struggle with the thought of, you know, like, this is still an industry and people move accordingly. And I think that's why it feels even more important to me to actually have community within that, and relationships where you are being held accountable, and friends who are seeing your work and being like, like, did you think about this? Or, you know, what, you know, I know you thought maybe this was this, but it wasn't quite that. So just like having people beyond just your colleagues, right? Like truly community, which is different than like a lot of the spaces that we can find ourselves in, that really will see you and hear you and reflect things back to you.
I mean, Laura and I both are part of Women Photograph. Additionally, I'm also part of Diversify Photo. You know, like BDC, we have, I was a part of BDC when it just started. So we have a small community there too. And though I'm here in India, we are in touch because of the beautiful internet that we have. So, and I'm, you know, I also studied in ICP. So I have a community there too. So sometimes there are some questions that we have that you doubt about yourself or you want to verify. So we reach out to each other, you know, in these forums, which are private. And then we say, hey, this is what I got from the editor. Do you think it is okay? Hey, this is what I got. And this is the particular contract. Do you think I should sign it? So we all reach out to each other because, you know, we are there to push each other up.
I think that's really, really helpful. And it really, yeah, important, I guess, to like, I think Laura said at the start as well, find your people, you know, build that community and tap into it. And I guess part of what comes with that a little bit is being giving of your time to your colleagues as well, which can be difficult in a sometimes competitive environment. We didn't talk too much yet about gender, and I do want to be sure that I sort of highlight a few questions about gender just before we close. I guess I'm wondering, how do you feel, for starters, that gender impacts your work as a photographer? And I know, Smita, I saw your son make a debut there briefly earlier. That was lovely. He's really lovely. And I know that you also were pregnant with him while you were working on part of the story, weren't you? Would you like to talk a little bit about that, maybe?
Yes. So, you know, there are things that as a man, you don't have to think about. You can just go and do it. For a woman, it's difficult. For example, when you have your periods, when you're menstruating, and if you're working on a certain place, in a remote place, if you forget to take your tampons, what do? I mean, there are situations that can happen, and these are things that men don't have to think about, right? For me, the biggest challenge has always been about toilets. because even when I worked in Bangladesh or when I worked in other countries, finding a clean toilet is difficult. You end up getting, different infections. And again, there is hygiene issues and there are a lot of other things. So I think we all learn to have a very strong bladder. So these are, practical things that we face in the field. I'm not even talking about other things, patriarchy and all that. I'm not even talking about those things. I'm not even going in that direction. Maybe Laura, you can talk about those. But the NAGIO assignment, because when I started this assignment, I started this assignment and I found out I was pregnant. So it was really difficult. And it was like, should I do it? Should I not do it? What should I do? And I thought, I'm just going to be honest. And I told my editor. Apart from my family, the first person that I spoke to was my editor. And I told her, like, this is what, and she was very supportive. And she said that, can I talk to my superiors in the organization? I said, sure. And she spoke, and the entire organization was very supportive of me. And they worked according to my timeline, which are the months that I cannot work or when I'm going to go to maternity leave. So till the time I went to maternity leave, I worked, and I worked like hell with a huge belly. It was like really funny and difficult because you have to move around, and some of the places that I went, the car could not go in. You have to leave the car and you have to start walking. So that is difficult to walk. Fortunately, I was given an assistant to help me. So he carried a lot of the weight because I could not carry much. And also physically bending down, taking certain angles and working on it was risky. And the funny thing is, when my doctor heard about it, the doctor here in Delhi, she didn't even tell me. She told my husband that, you know what, I don't think she should do it. She should cancel it, and you should just enjoy your pregnancy and tell NetGeo to give you assignment to take photographs of flowers. Yeah, and I was angry. And I was horrified. And when we came out, my husband was concerned, because if a doctor says, that don't let her work, obviously he's concerned. I don't blame him. He's thinking about my protection. So there was a lot of negotiation that I had to do with him, that, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I'm going to be all right. I'm going to take care. I had to carry a blood pressure equipment. I had to carry toilet spray. I had to carry a lot of sanitizers before this pandemic happened. I had to carry a hell lot of things, masks, everything, when I worked on this. And I changed my doctor. I changed my location from Delhi. I went to my parents' house in Calcutta. I stayed there for 5 months. And then I worked because it was closer to Bangladesh and closer to the region that I was working. So I had to make these adjustments. And of course, I always had this doubt that, would I shoot or would I work differently if I was not pregnant? Would my work, would the quality be affected? And then again, as we spoke about the previous thing about having a community, that having that community was important, because there's another community called Mother's Photograph, found by Andrea Bruce. And I wrote in that community because I was supposed to go to Bangladesh, and I was in my 7th month of pregnancy. The moment you get your tickets, the US, of course, this didn't happen to me. It happened to my colleague, Yudhajit, the writer, who is an American. The moment he got his ticket, he got a thing that pregnant women should not travel to Bangladesh because of the Zika virus. There were certain Zika virus cases there. And he immediately called me and he said, do you really want to go to Bangladesh with me? I mean, do you think you should go now? And he sent me the screenshot of that. And I didn't even show it to my husband. He doesn't even know about it. No one in my family knows about it. I called my doctor, and he was such a nice person. I had a male doctor. He was so nice. And he was like, dude, forget all that. Just be careful. And I spoke to some scientists who worked in water, in water management and other things in Bangladesh. And they said the area that I was going to work was safe and it was okay. So then I took my mother with me just to have a support. She traveled with me all the way to Bangladesh. Most of the time she stayed in the hotel and watched movies. But then again, just having the thought that somebody is with me was a huge blessing. So these are the things, I mean, those are my experience of working on it.
That's super interesting. It's really interesting to hear. It's really reassuring and really positive to hear how supportive Nat Geo were as well of, understanding your timeline and being very accommodating. And you would hope, obviously, that would be the case, but it's nice to hear that is. Laura, Smita really set you up there to tackle the patriarchy. So do you, do you want to go for that?
I guess for me, when people ask about gender stuff or talk about gender stuff, I think about like the socialization of being female or male and how those interactions are peppered in every experience, or many, right? How you're perceived. And yeah, I think a lot about behind the scenes, even interacting via email, when you become more assertive and how that's taken when someone knows that you're a woman versus a male, or when you're in negotiations for clients and asking for better pay. For me, often in the frontline spaces where I work that are like highly charged and highly policed, the way that they would treat me versus someone else. Sometimes it's like they see me as more threatening because I'm not acting like a woman. And then sometimes they treat me kind of like, with kid gloves just to be like, oh, she's unthreatening. So I think it's just like this commitment to being misunderstood in like many spaces kind of. And knowing that like there are times like, I mean, we're constantly assessing risk, right? Like I think being in the body that I'm in, it's like I'm used to feeling like there are certain threats that feel real, and like assessing like what is the depth of that I need to be paying attention to in this space and how. But then like in a bigger picture is like a more like full view of my career. The times that have been most transformative have been when I've had conversations with people to like make sure that I'm getting treated better on an assignment, or getting the same respect, or getting opportunities that I want, and getting validated and heard, and just being treated in a way that lines up with the other people who I might see getting the jobs or see getting the accolades and the awards. And then also interrogating what kind of imagery I make, and how is that seen? Is it seen as a more female story, or is it seen, like these pins that we put into things, and just constantly trying to challenge that. If I'm totally honest, like I don't talk a lot about gender, but gender's all over my work, and I mentioned this briefly about Scott, but like he was targeted because he's a figure in the community, because he's this like, educated white dude. And there's other people that are doing brilliant, incredible work in the community, but they wanted him because they thought that would set an example. And so I just, I think there's always these like themes of like, who's getting attention, who's getting heard, who's getting like erased from the story, who is getting less credibility, right? Like who gets to be the expert? I always ask that question. And I think that often becomes gendered. I think there's like so many, we could go on for ages, but yeah, who gets to be safe, who gets to be heard.
And someone asked in the lead up to the panel, what subtlety of gender equality still needs to be approached? Is there, do either of you have any thoughts about sort of maybe, thinking specifically, obviously, in the photography industry, and how maybe we position our work, or we put our work out there? Do you have any thoughts about that?
This question is a little confusing. Honestly, I don't know what to answer, so I'm sorry. Maybe Laura can say something.
That's grand, don't worry.
I'm always putting the gun at her.
Don't worry at all. Laura, what do you have any?
I mean, I think I keep repeating myself, but like find spaces where you're being treated well when you're working, like so when I get to work in like femme and queer spaces, I'm like, this is rad. Like people are listening, people are communicating well, people are being generous, people are being thoughtful. And then you get to focus on the creating, you get to focus on the work, you get to focus on trusting one another. And like, you have this like flow that's possible that is just less accessible if you're worried about all these other things. And so I just, being aware of that, I think, and seeking that out, and also, bringing people into the fold that don't have a seat at the table, and you know, making sure that if you get an opportunity, how do you then transfer that to someone else's opportunity as well? Or how do you make those skills something that other people can learn from? And I think a lot of that, you know, again, it's about breaking down these points of access or inaccess, right? Depending on how we've been categorized and what we've been told we're allowed to do or like be good at. So just challenging that and finding people who are interested in doing that with you.
Absolutely. And we have another question here from a participant who's asking, in terms, sometimes people don't understand, like you said, what media might mean or where images might go. So in terms of when images get taken into the curation process, how do you make sure that how do you have that conversation with curators about, you know, or editors, and how do you negotiate that and deal with those situations? We've touched on that a little bit earlier, I think, but if you maybe had a couple quick tools or pointers that you could offer.
Okay, I'll just take that. So here is the deal. When you're working for publications such as New York Times or Wall Street Journal, on daily assignments, not the long-term projects like Nat Geo, you know, you are sent on a particular assignment. You go there and you are given a particular synopsis that this is what the story is about and this is where you will go and this is what you're supposed to shoot. Sometimes something else happens and editors are always open. They are human beings and they understand, you know. So it's just a phone call away or just a quick message or just a quick email that, hey, I came here, but this is also happening. What should I do? Should I also do this? Should I also? And most of the time they say, yes, carry on, you know. And sometimes I've been asked to continue that the next day also. It's happened to me also. And then you give them the edit. So when you give them the edit of 15 images or 20 images, you are already taking a call as to what should go there in the newspaper, in the publication, because you are editing it down from the 200 or 300 images that you took on that assignment, right? So as I said, the strainer is active right now, right? And when it comes to a publication like Nat Geo, you're doing a work on a long term, on a longer assignment, then things are different because you are showing everything that you're taking, everything. And then you're working it together. It's a whole lot collaborative process. So it's an entirely different game when you work with news publications or on smaller assignments or when you're working on bigger projects.
Do you have anything to add to that, Laura, or not so much? No, that's great. Well, we're coming to the end of our time. So I was just wondering if you have any final thoughts. Please, you're welcome to sum up any final thoughts you might have. I guess I'll just say that I think I really value having both of you here. I really value both of you contributing your time to this conversation. And I really appreciate the thoughts you've shared. I think you both brought sort of really different experiences that speak to these themes in a really effective way. And I'm sure everybody found that very, very useful for thinking about their own work going forward. If you have any final thoughts, you're welcome to pipe up. But otherwise, I'll go ahead and we can go ahead and close. What do you think?
Just thank you so much for having me, Smita. It's been such a pleasure to share this time and space with you, and again for everyone who's come here and asked these questions. So thank you.
Thank you. I think we had a fantastic conversation. We laughed also talking about serious things, and that is what life is, right? You can't always be serious when you're working on serious things. And thank you for taking time to all the audience who came. And thank you, Savannah, for organizing this. Thanks.
So thank you all so much. And I'll go ahead and end the chat here. But thank you very much and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.